So hi everyone and welcome to our webinar. Today we are talking about onboarding and induction. My name is Julie Foster and I work in the Employer Engagement and Performance Division within the Apprenticeship Directorate in DFE. And I'm absolutely delighted to be joined today by some inspirational employers who have plenty of advice and guidance to bring you based on their own experiences. I will shortly be handing over to them for the main content of the webinar. Before we do get started properly, can I remind you that by registering and attending today, you've given your consent and are agreeing for the webinar to be recorded and uploaded onto our YouTube channel. If you feel that you've changed your mind regarding consent, can I ask that you please dial off immediately? The webinar is for employers, particularly small and medium enterprises, and it will be covering points around onboarding and induction. It will last approximately 40 minutes with hopefully time at the end for questions. Because today's session is going to cover lots of points and you might want to refer back to the content, we will email a copy of the recording to everyone who is registered after the webinar. The recording will also be uploaded to our DFE YouTube platform within the next couple of weeks. So I'm now very happy to hand over to today's presenters. We have three fantastic companies represented today: ARC Group London, the OPRA Group and Crimson. So I'll now hand over to Amy Packer from the ARC Group London to get us started. Thank you, Amy.
Thanks, Julie. Morning, everyone. So I'm Amy Packer, Social Value Manager at ARC Group London. I started as an apprentice within the construction industry 9 years ago, and now the Social Value Manager. So understand the process of being an apprentice and what works well and what doesn't work so well. So ARC Group was formed in 2005 and currently have 16% of our workforce as apprentices. We're really passionate in supporting the next generation, and we're lucky enough to have 5 different divisions so we can support a range of apprenticeships. So our 5 divisions include property services, M&E, capital projects, waterproofing and building safety. Next slide, please. So this highlights some of the apprenticeship opportunities we actually have available within the company. So we're proud to have been one of the top apprenticeship SME employers. I think there's going to be a link later on in the presentation about how SMEs can apply to be in the top 50 for 2023. So some of the apprenticeships that we offer, we have level 2 apprenticeships, level 3 and degree opportunities. So we've got level 2 in carpentry, roofing. And then we have level 3 in business administration, plumbing and electrical. And then our higher degree apprenticeships where we offer construction, design and built technician and quantity surveying. You can see at the bottom there, there's a little quote from one of our quantity surveying apprentices who's now completing his degree, who joined us from the age of 15, 16, leaving school and now working towards his degree in quantity surveying. Next slide, please. So the ARC induction process, so we treat them like any other employee. They will have a normal company induction. The only difference is we add a mentor program to their start. So they all have the company induction. They're all informed about the annual leave, all the information that you need to know when you start at a business. We provide them with detail of their apprenticeship program, college expectations. A lot of people joining an apprenticeship scheme have obviously come straight out of school or straight out of university, college, and might not understand the whole process of being in employment and kind of what the stages mean. So we clearly explain what's expected of them as an employee. We allocate a mentor. So within our business, that's myself. So I mentor our 17 apprentices. It's aside from the line manager or their day-to-day colleagues. I'm kind of that independent person. They can call up if they've got any questions, got any concerns, almost like a little buddy throughout their apprenticeship journey, making sure they're getting the experience they need on site and the support that's needed as well. This is done via monthly catch-ups with the mentor. So sometimes these might be a 5-minute phone call. Other times I will attend site or they will attend the office. Try and keep it a bit of a mixture of face-to-face and phone calls. And then they have a 3-month review with a senior manager within the business. Sometimes this is a director, so they can actually get a bit more of a feel of the team and see how they're getting on and ask any questions for like the higher level management. Next slide, please. So that all sounds perfect, but obviously there's always teething problems and things don't always go as expected. So as I mentioned, it potentially could be their first ever job, not necessarily understanding the expectations. A lot of people join the construction industry because they think it's the right thing to do, but they don't understand the early mornings. Being on site for 7:30 can be a bit tricky sometimes for someone who's just starting out their career. So attendance and timekeeping has been kind of a bit of an issue with our apprentices previously. The way we've kind of got around this is introducing a trial week. So we've found that this works really well. So it's like a week's work experience. So we'll get someone apply for an apprenticeship position. We'd narrow it down to potentially maybe 3 or 4 applicants. They would all complete a trial week. Sometimes the apprentice themselves will then realise this isn't for me, this isn't what I expected. And then other times they think, yeah, love this, this is exactly what I want to do. But it gives them that opportunity prior to signing up to the apprenticeship programme, which sometimes can be 4 years, gives them that opportunity to actually see if it's for them, meet the team that they would be working with, and get a bit more of an understanding of kind of what's involved in the role. Another teething problem we have is use of mobile phones. As I'm sure everyone knows, people can't live without their phones. And this is something we've kind of had to install, especially on construction sites, that phones are obviously a health and safety issue, only to be used in emergencies. It sounds like common sense, but obviously sometimes phones become your next hand. So also, the last section that we've struggled with previously is not knowing who to contact in certain situations. So this is where the mentoring program come in. So a lot of apprentices don't want to disturb people. They think people are busy. They don't want to ask too many questions. They don't want to seem like a hindrance in the role. So by having that mentor system, my phone's always available. They can call me, text me, ask any questions. So I think it's important to have either that buddy or that mentor throughout the process. Next question, please. Next slide, please. So working in collaboration with training providers. So this has been really important to us, and they've supported us a lot in growing our apprentices. As I mentioned, some of our apprenticeships can be for 4 years, so our electrical and plumbing apprenticeships. So it's really important early on to have that engagement with the training provider and ensure that we understand the programme. So we normally visit the training provider, so the university or the college, get a feel for where the students are going to be learning, who they're going to be taught by, get a bit more of an understanding, have the training provider visit the apprentice's place of work. So sometimes, maybe once a quarter, we have a visit from training providers, come and see where the apprentice is working, get a bit more of a feel of kind of what's involved in their role. Regular catch-ups with the training provider. Roughly every 8 to 10 weeks. Again, these can be phone calls or face-to-face. We have a quick catch-up with the provider to make sure that we're providing the support that the apprentice needs to complete their portfolios and continue their journey, which goes on to the next point about understanding the apprenticeship programme and when they need to complete each unit. For example, with the electrical apprentices, they have an inspection and testing unit, so we need to make sure that they're on site completing testing inspection to obviously support their course. Next slide, please. So using an apprentice service account, so if you don't yet have one, they're really easy to set up. This is the kind of the screenshot you will see. If you go onto Google and type in Gov Manage Apprenticeships, you'll be able to set up an account. This allows you to add apprentices and you can obtain your funding. Many training providers will also support you in setting this up, so feel free to ask them if you need any support in this as well. Next slide, please. Once you're logged in, this is kind of the screen that you will get. You can see your apprenticeships, if you want to put any adverts on for advertising apprenticeship vacancies, and then you can see if you've got any cohorts that you've requested to be approved. Next slide, please. Clicking onto the apprenticeship section brings you up this screen where you can add your apprenticeship to obtain the funding. Next slide, please. So once you've clicked on add an apprentice, this is the screenshot that you will see. You will need information from the training provider at this point, as you need their UK PRN number. So it's pretty straightforward. Once you start it, you can add the apprentice details in, their contact details, the training provider's details in, and it's automatically linked to your PAYE scheme, and then the apprentice will be added to the system. And then from that, you'll be able to automatically get funding via the government. Next slide, please.
Okay, thanks, Amy. That was your last
Thank you.
slide.
Thanks, Julie.
Thanks so much for your input. Some really good points there, especially around teething problems and some of the solutions you've come up with. So what I'll do now, I'll go straight on to the next presentation, which is the OPRA group, and I'd like to hand over to Adele.
Lovely, thanks very much. Hello everyone. Can I have the next slide, please? So just a bit of an introduction. My name's Adele Carnera. I own OPRA. We're an HR and people solutions company. So we look after anything from recruitment, pre-employment screening, managing organisational change. We do HR consultancy, a lot of apprenticeship work, and bespoke training. I've been the chair of the Apprentice Ambassador Network in Essex for the last 5 years. And before that, worked with the London AAN for a number of years. The Apprentice Ambassador Network is a network of employers, for those of you that don't know, a network of employers and apprentices, old and new, that volunteer and form the network to share and inform on all things apprenticeships. So I think there is a link in the chat about with more information on how to become part of the network. So a lot of the points I'll talk about today are not just from OPRA, they're points that I've gathered through the network and through our members, so hopefully representative of multiple employers. OPRA, I've worked in large companies, but OPRA is an SME. We've got 35 staff and at the moment 5 apprentices. So I'm used to looking after programs of apprentices from 1,500 down to the current cohort we've got of 5 that are doing different things. I'm committed to all things apprenticeships, and I think that onboarding and induction and getting it right at the beginning is really critical to make any apprenticeship a success. Can I have the next slide, please? So why is induction and onboarding important? Regardless of the size of company, the process of onboarding all new employees is one of the most critical factors in making sure that you've got productive, contented workers. Most organisations, teams are diverse, and your onboarding experience needs to be personal to your company, reflecting your culture, values, your employer brand if you have one. And what I've learned in coming from large to small companies, that all of these kind of corporate HR terms actually can apply to any size of business, and it's worth investigating and talking to people, you know, other employers like in the network, about how these things can apply to your business. Even in a small specialist company, creating bespoke onboarding and a bespoke experience for your apprentices will help with effective communication. And I think that effort at the beginning will save hours of time further along, ensuring that throughout the first year of employment, your apprentice and you and the training provider is informed at all times. Can I have the next slide, please? So when you're thinking about onboarding and induction, I've just listed some questions that we've gathered that you may want to ask yourselves when you're thinking about this kind of thing. So when will onboarding start, and how long will it last? It's a common thought to think that onboarding is just for the first few days or the first week or so. Onboarding can last up to the first year, so it's important to understand what that's going to look like for your organisation. What impression do you want new apprentices to walk away with at the end of the first day? And what do you want new apprentices to know and understand after 6 months? What information? So what do new apprentices need to know about their apprenticeship, about their job, about the culture and your working environment? What role will HR managers and colleagues play in the process? What kind of goals or measures would you like to set for your new apprentices? And how will you gather feedback on the programme and measure its success? And that's feedback from the apprentices themselves, from their managers, and from everyone involved in the process. The next slide, please. These are some ideas about information to share during induction and during an onboarding process. So the first one, what are your company's standards and expectations? Amy mentioned before, use of mobile phones, behaviours on site or in an office or wherever your company location is. Everywhere's different, so it's important to be really clear and set those expectations out at the beginning. Who are the main points of contact for the apprentice? What colleagues, what managers, who are the people that are going to be with them day to day during their working day? Make sure you focus on the apprentice experience and ask for their feedback at regular points. Again, something Amy mentioned, introducing the training provider and the relationship. Fully explain. It helps to align your induction and onboarding with any form of induction that the training provider will also be providing, and making sure that that's consistent and not confusing for the apprentices. Be clear with your apprentices how and when and what they will be paid, and also how funding works. I had an example recently when one of our apprentices saw, funding, how much their apprenticeship would cost, and was petrified that I'd have to pay thousands of pounds for their apprenticeship, and they felt that was a lot of pressure. And when we explained the funding and government contributions, that it was a lot easier for them to not have that pressure of achieving when it might be costing their employer thousands of pounds. Another important one, explain the timeline, show the apprentice their individual learning plan, their work timetable, when the 20% off the job is going to happen, just so that they're really clear and understand expectations and where they should be when. Spend time on explaining and illustrating your company culture. Even if there's just 2 of you, you're in the apprentice, it's really important to explain it's your company, your employer, and it's important to explain what that means and what the culture's like. And also importantly, empower your apprentice to be in control of their learning and manage their apprenticeship. Next slide, please. Key advice, again, including your training provider in induction and onboarding, introducing the tri-party relationship between the training provider, the employer, and most importantly within that, the line manager and the apprentice. Those of us that have managed apprentices will more often than not have experienced a situation where there's conflicting or contrasting information between the employer directive and the provider directive, and it's really important that you as the employer and the provider present yourselves as a joint united front there to help and support, so there's no confusion around expectations. Ensure that apprentices line managers are included, engaged on all stages of the induction and onboarding process. It shouldn't be a separate thing done by HR or somebody different or training. It should again be aligned and joined up, and you'll see there's a theme from me here that everyone's supporting and around the apprentice should be on the same page and included in all of those comms. Again, you're referring to something that Amy said. It's likely your apprentices are on their first job and you may need to make adjustments around expectations. Be prepared to clarify and underline behaviours, office or site expectations. On the flip side, there may be apprentices that are, you know, at a different stage in their career and are coming back to work or back to learning. And I'm used to studying and I'm familiar with studying and how to balance that with work. So there's also, it's important to remember that there may be older apprentices that have got different needs. Also, don't be afraid to, if you've got apprentices doing an apprenticeship that doesn't necessarily have a network of support within the business, you can use somewhere like the AAN to find external mentors to help. We had an example where we didn't have enough marketing experience at a senior level internally to support one of our apprentices, and we were able, through network relationships, to find an external marketing mentor, and that worked amazingly. And again, remember, onboarding is ongoing. It's not just the first few days or weeks. Next slide, please. So why is all this important? There's loads of positives your business can receive through taking the time at the beginning. It will reduce management time further on, increase your employee engagement of your apprentices, gives you the opportunity to tell your company story as you want it to be told. Absolutely will improve your completion stats and retention of your apprentices, so reducing employee turnover. It will help you understand your apprentices if you've got an open dialogue with them and you're gaining feedback all the way along. Absolutely better communications all around. It's more opportunity to encourage and support your apprentices and share the right information, and also gives lots of opportunity to grow the apprentices network. It does take a family to raise an apprentice, so it's important, as I keep saying, that everyone's involved, and also gives consistency to the experience for everybody. Next slide, please. And as I've said a few times, in my experience, it's really important to remember it's a partnership, albeit with 3 people: the training provider, the employer and the apprentice. And if everyone's engaged and has a consistent message, then it's absolutely certain to be a success. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Adele. That was excellent. Again, really good points coming out about expectations for induction and advice that, you know, we can share with everybody. But I think what's really key, and it's come out right the way through your presentation, was about working together and partnership. So I'd like to move on now to Jo from Crimson and let you start your presentation.
Thank you. So Crimson is a company that works in the IT sector. We're both an IT solutions and an IT recruitment company. We've had a successful apprenticeship programme running through our IT Academy, which has been running for 5 years now. And we're also looking at how we can expand our apprenticeship offers across the wider business at the moment. So really looking at how we can use apprenticeships to help develop the company. A few years ago, we won a highly commended from the Apprenticeship Awards for our Academy model, and we've also recently been rated at number 10 in the top 50 SME employers. My background is in apprenticeships, and I've worked in apprenticeships for many, many years, different roles with different companies, and I've been with Crimson for 18 months now. Our onboarding is really important to the success of our programmes. And I couldn't emphasise enough, it's something that you really need to plan for prior to day one of your apprentice starting. Next slide, please. So I sat and thought about why we onboard, and 3 things really came to mind. The first thing that came to mind was well-being. So it really does help support an apprentice when they start in a new business, if they feel like they're part of that business and really understand and feel like they're taken care of. So well-being for me is really crucial. From a business perspective, if somebody doesn't feel comfortable in your organisation, they may want to leave, and that again has implications for the business, the cost, the time, in what is quite a tricky labour market situation at the moment. The other one for me was productivity, both from the company perspective. We're small companies, we do need to keep an eye on the cost of things, so getting your apprentice productive is really important from that perspective, but also for themselves as well. You can't underestimate the amount of motivation that comes when somebody first contributes to a project, to a piece of work, and the way that they feel about that going forwards. Third one is support not just to get from through the apprenticeship programme, which is really important, but support to develop and grow within that job role. Next slide, please. So just wanted to go a little bit more in depth around wellbeing. I see onboarding starting from the minute you've made an offer and somebody has accepted it. And in the apprenticeship world, particularly when you're looking at very the early stages of somebody's career, they may be school leavers. You may recruit them prior to them taking exams, etc. And there may be a gap in between when you take them on and them starting. And I think it's really important to keep in touch during that period so it doesn't start to feel a bit disconnected to them. Definitely establish a point of contact so they feel comfortable to get in touch with you, and let them really know about what they need to do for day one and the first few days in terms of dress code, any equipment they might need. Get them looking at how they're going to get to work, etc. Because the last thing you want is for something to go wrong in the early stages. With the current situation that we're just coming out of the pandemic, there's a lot of young people that have missed some of that socialisation. So it's really important they feel comfortable. So making those things really clear is important. The other thing that I think is really important is not to assume that people will know anything at all. At this point, you don't really know a lot about the background. Do they have a good role model in their personal life that's going to help them? Do they have a financial situation where they're going to be able to afford the travel to work if it's going to be a month before they get their first salary? So not assuming anything and bringing these topics to the forefront, and being really clear about things. What is your workplace protocol, etc. If you do have an option for remote working, does that person have the facilities at home? They will not bring that up with you, but if you bring it up, you might find out a little bit more as to where you might be able to help to buy a desk or subsidise some travel to work costs, etc. The other thing that's really important is culture, and getting them to understand a little bit about what your company perceives as the right way to behave, what's seen as good. At Crimson, we have a really strong learning culture that we all learn from each other. We also have, we're very keen on a growth mindset and learning by making mistakes. And we really instill that in the early days. And we were really fortunate. One of our apprentices felt comfortable enough to present back on an error that she'd made, to support everyone else in not making the same mistake. And she, within a couple of months of starting with us, she felt comfortable to do that. So I think it's really important to get some of these things across that people may not understand from their prior experiences or advice they've had from people they're close to. Next slide, please. In terms of productivity, I think it's really important to make sure that people have a good understanding. What's the purpose of the organisation? If you've taken someone on, for example, in finance, do they understand what the company's main aim and objectives are, where they fit into that, and a little bit of commercial awareness. If they don't do a part of their role, how does that impact other people, etc., etc. Obviously, compliance information is really important, but meeting people, understanding who's in which team. It's easy to forget that, but it is quite important in the early stages that people know who they are and can take care of them and help them as they need to be. And we find simple things like email or meeting protocols. People have not accepted meeting invites, and they don't understand that by not accepting the meeting until you're about to join the meeting means that people are there unaware of whether you're joining or not. So it's some of the simple things that you don't, maybe as it's more experienced people, we don't understand that people might not know how to work with that. Email protocols, how quickly should you respond to it? How often should you be checking your emails, etc. And making sure that people are on top of those things. And then the underpinning key skills to start actually contributing in their role. I feel that's really important, that motivation that you get, that sense of purpose and being part of the business by achieving something, and somebody patting you on the back saying good job. If there's something that you can give to people early on, that's, I think, is a real positive. Next slide, please. And then, as everyone has spoken about, support is really, really important. So training support, provider support, we work very closely with our training provider and they are incredibly supportive. They also understand our business very well because we've worked with them for a little while and they've taken that time to understand us. And they can really help and support people in those early stages and ongoing throughout the apprenticeship programme to help with that onboarding process. Our training provider actually comes out to our business to present to our learners when we take them on, and that's really valuable. So they see that we're all linked up together and working together to support them. We also get help from our training provider with levy transfer, which again can help support any costs that you have with the apprenticeship programme, and claiming any grants as well, which is quite important for an SME organisation. So we work very much with our training provider. We also allocate people a mentor when they come in. So this is somebody separate from their line manager, and this is somebody that can help them with role-focused training and support, really impact with their expertise. And we've found that they really help our apprentices to understand how to work with customers a lot better, and they are their professional role model. We have a buddy system where we use an apprentice in their second year to support with things like the content of the course, how to balance work and your apprenticeship programme, good sources for evidence, and how to build a portfolio because they've literally just gone through the same experience. And then in my role, I also help from pastoral care with things like the employment contracts, milestones we build into our apprenticeship programme, and the additional business skills that apart from their main role as written in a job description, for example, lots of different elements to being a good business employee as well. And we do a lot of things through practical methods, so really helping them to learn by the practical experience. Next slide, please. So this is an example of our academy model where we have a very formal, very structured programme. We take on a number of between 6 to 10 people on the academy model, and this is how we structure our programme. So we have in green some of the crimson-led training where we're supporting people to get on board with the job role and understand the company. In the pink we've got our training provider led, where we have some blocks at the beginning, and then we have we allocate 1 day a week for our apprentices. And just a little hint, we allocate Monday because we want our apprentices to learn something at the start of the week and then embed it as they go through the week, so it's still fresh in their mind. I've known a lot of people who've used Fridays, and I've seen that there's a little bit of a disconnect. They've learned something, but by Monday it's not so fresh in their minds. We do an element called Consultant Toolkit. It's where we try and develop some of those more business related skills and some role play work once our apprentices have got to grips. And then we allocate them to live client projects. In the early stages, they're very much in a shadowing position, learning and developing, but also we then get them to start to contribute a little bit more after the first few months. And Knowledge Academy is where we do concentrated sessions on business skills. So these happen roughly once a month, and we really help them with things like commercial awareness, problem solving. We look at stress, particularly as we're coming into the endpoint assessment part of the programmes, and we look at developing awareness of yourself and how you work with other people. So lots of very different elements in that. And then we have some technical exams that are based on the technology that the particular candidate is working with. And then at the end of the programme, we hope that they will want to progress onto the degree apprenticeship programme as well. Thank you. Next slide.
Okay, thank you very much, Jo. Such helpful guidance there in terms of how to most effectively welcome and support your apprentices into your organisations. Great advice in terms of how to structure that early support and signposting, you know, to all the things you should consider to create an effective induction programme. And in fact, I'd like to thank you all, our presenters today, who have been absolutely brilliant in conveying their experiences with that early stages of the apprenticeship journey, and how important it is to get it right at the beginning, so that it is more likely leads to a positive outcome with high retention of apprentices. Hopefully many of you attending today have been able to take something away that you can use to support your onboarding and induction practices.